Hello, my name's Kurt Budge. I'm the Chief Executive of Leading Edge Materials. I joined the company in May this year. Leading Edge is listed in Toronto and Stockholm, and we have a portfolio of critical raw materials projects all located in the EU.
Nice to meet you, Kurt. Last time we spoke to Eric, I think it was back in June last year. We haven't heard much since. So if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind a kind of refresher course on what the company's trying to do. But I've got to start, first of all, with you. So how long have you been on board?
I joined in May. So what's that? Best part of 5 months now. My previous role was 8.5 years as the CEO of Beowulf Mining. Beowulf was also operating in Sweden and also in Finland.
Okay, and what did you do there?
Beowulf had iron ore projects north of the Arctic Circle in Sweden, a project called Kallak. Took me 7.5 years to get an exploitation concession mining lease for the Kallak project. That was precipitated by the Green Party leaving government in Sweden. And 3 months later, we got the mining lease. And then also in Finland, we had a portfolio of exploration projects in the graphite space, then developed a downstream project, similar to what Leading Edge has also done. And with Beowulf was exploration in Central Europe. Again, another similarity with Leading Edge because we've got an exploration program in Romania.
Right, okay. I guess the first thing to note is that you've got 3 projects, so it's 2 in Sweden, 1 in Romania. I always think with small companies, I'm interested in their allocation of capital and what the focus is. Because trying to beat all things to all men usually ends in disaster. So can you kind of run through the 3 projects for me?
Yeah. So Eric Kraft, who's our cornerstone shareholder, first came into Leading Edge probably around 2018, and his interest at the time was very much in the graphite asset, the Voxna mine. Voxna is a built and permitted graphite mine, but it's been on care and maintenance for most of its life. So under Leading Edge's ownership since 2015, there have been a variety of studies, like a lot of graphite companies look to go downstream. So that asset is currently on care and maintenance still. One of my jobs at the moment is to do a strategic review. There's a huge amount of technical work for me to get into and figure out how we can make a business case for the mining project. So that really doesn't burn a lot of cash. Norra Kärr is our heavy rare earths project in southern Sweden. It's an interesting year for Norra Kärr and also Voxna because of the Critical Raw Materials Act coming in. And so one of the things that I was focused on in the summer was applying for strategic project status for Norra Kärr. If we get that, that's a game changer as far as I'm concerned. Legal timeframes on permitting, potentially access to capital facilitated by the EU, and also matchmaking in terms of offtake arrangements. So Norra Kärr at the moment, strategic project application is in. We'll get a decision by mid-March next year. And then we're in the latter stages of applying for a mining lease, new mining lease, because Norra Kärr, don't forget, had a mining lease in 2013. And because of the twists and turns of permitting mining projects in Sweden, which I'm well aware because of my experience with the Kallak project, that mining lease reverted to an application. And so we're reapplying. But the difference this time round is the Norra Kärr mining project is effectively a quarry at site that produces a heavy rare earth concentrate and an industrial mineral nepheline cyanide. So it's an order of magnitude lower in complexity. The sustainability of the project has been increased because we're now producing this industrial mineral nepheline cyanide, which wasn't included in the previous technical work. And the footprint of the project has been reduced by 65%, and the environmental impact associated with the project has also been reduced. So it's a very different project for permitting through the mining process in Sweden. And then finally, we've got the exploration program in Romania. Leading Edge owns 51% of a joint venture there. We've got the opportunity to move to 90%. What excites me as a mining engineer is that we are effectively doing brownfield exploration. We're in a historic mining camp. It was formerly mined in Soviet times. And the Soviet exploration was basically put tunnels into the side of a mountain. So we've got access into the guts of what we hope is a deposit. And so we announced a couple of weeks ago that we got our drill rig turning there. And, and we announced at the end of 2023, cobalt nickel grades, high grade chip samples and stuff like this. And then more recently, we've announced this polymetallic mineralization. We've got kilometers and kilometers of underground development, which put us underground in the heart of what we hope will be a deposit. So it's quite exciting to have that starter for 10 situation rather than be sitting on surface trying to figure out what's going underneath you. We can actually get inside and see stuff and sample stuff, and now we can drill.
Right. Okay. And so back to my kind of original statement, which is around small companies trying to do too much with not enough capital. It's been a tough 3-4 years. Juniors have been, I guess, punished for the apathy in the marketplace, and or maybe punished for years of value destruction. I don't know how you want to look at it, but if you've got these 3 projects, and obviously you are looking to advance them all, and drive the value of each of these things. But how do you play? How do you rank them? What's the order, or therefore the order of play? And how do you finance these things going forward?
We're just starting with your last point. We are benefited because Eric Kraft, our cornerstone shareholder, has been investing in the company since 2018. So, my experience with having to raise capital from equity capital markets, it's incredibly punishing. If things don't go your way, you clearly don't get rewarded in terms of share price development, and it just gets harder and harder and harder. So we're benefited because Eric Kraft is the first name on the book build of any financing that we do, and the investors that are coming in alongside him, and he doesn't want to get diluted, so he's maintained his 38% shareholding. The investors that are coming alongside him are also long-only investors. We've got nobody playing short-term games with the share price. So, our share price, when you look at it, is incredibly stable. We're listed in Toronto as Stockholm. It's an incredibly stable share price. That hopefully the share price development will come over time. And that's one of the reasons I've been hired is with a track record of getting permits for difficult mining projects in Sweden. I'm not saying that Norra Kärr is going to be difficult going forward because it's very different to the project that previously had a mining lease. But I think if you want to talk about the pecking order, from my perspective coming in, Norra Kärr is the project that gets all the headlines at the moment in terms of a project that we can actually get through near-term milestones. Near-term milestones being strategic project status granted by the EU, and then following that, mining lease. We get those, and then we really start to work hard on the technical work associated with the project and also the commercials. When I was preparing the strategic project application, there's 15 years of technical work done on Norra Kärr. 2 PEAs and 1 pre-feasibility study. So we've got, it's a real strong foundation that we are building on. And as I said earlier, the mine is now effectively a quarry. It's that simple. And then we've decoupled the permitting for the industrial, the downstream process. And I will be looking very hard at the small rare earths ecosystem that exists in Europe to find the partners that can work with us on that downstream and delivering that industrial project. That industrial project is currently penciled in to be sited in Luleå. Luleå is a place with an industrial park that is able to control and permit those processes. So we've de-risked the project, the overall project development path in terms of permitting, rather than trying to say we're going to stick everything on this site, in southern Sweden. So Norra Kärr is my focus, but we do have the exploration program going ahead in Romania, and then really Voxna for the time being is on a low level of it's still on care and maintenance strategic review. So you've got a development project that's moving forward. You've got a mine, the Voxna mine, that if you wanted to turn it on, you could turn it on, in terms of several months of restart work, but then. We've got the exploration program in Romania as well. So, I think sometimes that kind of diversification is appealing to investors. What investors shouldn't be misled by is that we're very focused. There's no lack of focus on what we need to do with the different areas of the business, and I think we've got the right level of focus across the board.
Right, and you feel with Eric that kind of cornerstone of the 38%, and he's following his money to retain his whole. That's a help. And sometimes it can be a problem, but in this case, you're saying that's kind of useful. Are there aspects of Voxner. Could you flip it out if you wanted to? Given Eric's that was Eric's baby initially. It's because graphite is kind of little understood by the market. You may not see the value that you want to see from this for some time. Is a strategic partner the best thing to do, or selling it the best thing to do, or do you genuinely believe that having this variety, this smorgasbord of metals, is the right thing for the company?
The ability to have greater focus on the areas of business that really matter to us is important to me. If I take my time with Beowulf, we were somewhat forced to go down the diversification route, and we did sensible diversification because we couldn't get the permit for the first project. And if your first cab doesn't come off the rank, then what are you going to do? And I was never a CEO that sat on his hands and did nothing. So we stepped into graphite exploration in Finland, and that turned out to be, a fairly neat opportunity because, again, Beowulf is still pursuing a downstream graphite project, and Voxner has the same potential. We haven't built a permitted mine, but I keep a very open mind. If somebody turned up tomorrow and said, "We'd like to buy the asset off you," and we could divest the asset, then we would give that some serious consideration. It has to be the right buyer because, we take our responsibilities very seriously. We've been managing that site from an environmental standpoint for a good number of years, and we have a good relationship with the local authorities. So one eye on stewardship of the asset and doing the right thing. But, our job is to create shareholder value. My job is to create shareholder value. And, I'm a firm believer that we can make Norra Kärr bring it to fruition and bring it into production in the time frame that's going to make a meaningful difference to heavy rare earth supply into the EU. So there's the answer to your question.
Right. Well, partial answer, because I kind of want to focus on the graphite component, because like Norra Kärr with heavy rare earths, there's a real kind of skill set to that. Both those assets, both those commodities, ex-China, the skill sets are really hard to come by. And that's the constant game and the constant battle that you guys are playing. Certainly people in those commodities are playing with China. They can, if any part of your ecosystem needs to insert itself into the Chinese food chain, they can control your margins. That I think that's probably well understood by you. And so with regards to the Voxner graphite project in a European ecosystem, are there enough players there to maybe come along and help you fund this thing in whatever structure that you decide you want to do or may accept doing? Or is it a case of hold on to this thing until it becomes more valuable further down the line? Again, how do you view that?
Well, having just come back from Sweden and stayed on Voxner for a night, I don't enjoy the experience of staying on a mothballed mine. To be honest with you, it's a bit like a Scooby-Doo set. And going around a plant that isn't operational, or being on a mine that isn't operational. I'm an operator at heart. I like to see trucks and shovels moving. And the happiest you'll ever see me is when products coming out of a plant and loading a truck or a train or filling a bag and what have you and being dispatched. Because then I know we're in business. And that's one of my key focuses.
So how do you do that? How do you solve that problem?
Oh, I think just reiterating the technical work that's been done on Voxner to look at the different options. There has to be a way of making this asset work. I think that my own take on what's happening in Europe at the moment, I'm a big believer in collaboration. I think the Critical Raw Materials Act is making people think about greater collaboration. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to have supply chains as short as we can, and if we can put them all in Europe, the whole supply chain in Europe, the value chain, then I think parties will come together along that value chain and make it happen. And one key aspect of that is to have it sustainable financially for everybody that's involved in the supply chain. And let's actually walk the talk in terms of a green transition. Let's believe that we don't want to export our needs to jurisdictions that maybe don't operate to the standards that we know that we operate to in Europe. And it's not being holier than thou. It's just that, what people say time and time again, #responsible mining and sustainable mining. We've got with Voxner and with Norra Kärr, as I've said previously with other projects, you effectively in Sweden, you can plug a mine into the grid and you can power it by renewables. And that's the opportunity in terms of how you fuel these operations rather than using diesel or whatever. And we have the opportunity to create something that's really impactful in a good way in terms of, fulfilling society's needs for raw materials, critical raw materials, and doing it in a responsible way.
I get all of that, and I want to get into how you're going to do it, right? So I get the good citizen thing, and that's, you need to do it, especially Sweden. You need to do that, but there's a kind of small project. I'm sticking with Vox now for a while. There's a small project now. Is it big enough to be of interest to people with the skill sets to be able to help you move that thing forward?
I think as part of it,
because I think you were at PEA stage. Is that PEA stage, right? Is that right? From 2021, something like that?
With the PEA was under the anode project. So
right, okay.
In terms of technical work, post the last time that the mine was in production. So we know the mine can produce a 94% concentrate. And then subsequent to that were, the classic test work around spheronization, purification, battery grade material, then your anode plant. And so all that work's been done. I don't think on its own, it's not the size to support an anode plant, but as part of a collective story within Europe, because any downstream plant has got to pull in feed from more than one place. That diversification is it's a sensible thing to do from a risk perspective. So I think there are projects that could take Voxna material as part of a feed. Again, going back to the ESG credentials, the life cycle analysis that has been done of the mine, and the fact it can be plugged into the grid, as I've said. So I think there is a place for the project within that graphite market in Europe.
It has some value. You're saying it has some value at some point down the line.
Yeah.
And it gets a question of how much more work you've got to do, or, can you bring a partner in now who will kind of, with a balance sheet that can kind of share the load or take it over in some respects. Okay, look, I'm not going to push you more on that one. I think we know where that is now, and your attitude to it. And I'll come back to the rare earths if I can. Can I jump to the exploration in Romania? Obviously, like I say, there's a lot happened on the ground. There's a lot of old data, etc. And we're probably into a territory that people better understand in the shape of copper and cobalt. As esoteric as copper has decided to be recently, the copper component is of great interest. With the exploration, that requires a lot of work before you get drilling, and then when you get drilling, it starts to get super, super expensive. So again, how do you play something like that, especially in a country like Romania, which has kind of got, I guess, mixed reviews?
The strategy that we've taken this year, from practically speaking, is to buy our own rig and then to man it with a contractor. So it's a very tightly run ship. The beauty of Romania is that it's, in my eyes, brownfield exploration, because we've got all this underground access. Not the drive that we're in, the gallery that we're in at the moment, but the next gallery that we go to is 8 kilometers of underground development. It's and when you put in a couple of geologists there to do the mapping, we're coming up with hundreds of meters of polymetallic mineralization observation. Now, what we need to do there is to, again, like a lot of these situations, we have a 70-year-old geologist who's been working this area for decades. His database of information is up here. We also have the historical records that come from various repositories. So this story, this picture is what we're trying to prove up to then educate our investors much better. But from a prospectivity, the fact that we're underground, we've made observations, we've been able to take channel samples and rock chip samples and these kind of things. Now what we have to do is really put meat on the bones with proper drilling, proper intersections, and proper grade. But we have the opportunity to really, make something of this.
So did you say that the drilling has started?
Yes,
on that or
2
not?
weeks ago. The drill rig was on site.
2 weeks ago, fantastic. It was on site and turning. Okay. And have you put out any results yet?
No. It's probably a couple of months away at least from putting out date assays.
Okay. And have you sort of indicated, how many meters or how many dollars that you're going to be spending on that?
No, we haven't. No. So we did a raise recently, which was in 2 tranches, and we raised just over 4 million Canadian dollars. And that money is for across the business, but we haven't disclosed to the market exactly what the split is and how it's going to be allocated.
Right. Will you at some point?
Not in the short term, no. Because I think for us it's a moving target effectively, because depending on which project is showing the best potential, then that's where the funds flow. So it's not hard and fast.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess the market is informing that on a daily basis. I think copper seems to be going on a run, and rare earths, heavy rare earths or not, have had a lot of downward pressure on them recently, despite what critical mineral lists are being put out there. So you play that by ear, and that's fair enough. That's reasonable. Therefore, I can't really talk too much more about the copper. The Romanian asset. If we can bounce up to Norra Kärr, how do you pronounce that? Kärr. Karr. Share. Okay. Can we just go about how you play that? Because again, I kind of referenced it earlier. The Chinese influence in this space is significant and a lot of pressure. But I think the Europeans are starting to get their act together somewhat. It's a question of how do you insert yourself into an ecosystem of friendly folks that can help you move that forward. How do you see this moving forward?
Well, one of the things I've been saying in lots of interviews is talking about the impact that the Critical Raw Materials Act should have, and then the strategic project status. So this, working through the strategic project application, and this was a real education for me. So Norra Kärr is discovered by the Swedish Geological Survey in the 1900s. It's explored by Boliden in the 70s. It's had 15 years of technical work done in it from, say, 2009, when a predecessor to Leading Edge Materials got hold of the licenses. And that has seen two PEAs and 1 pre-feasibility study in 2015 on the rare earths. It had a mining lease in 2013 for when all of the activity associated with the project, both the mining and the downstream processing, was sited at Norra Kärr. And then because of one thing or another, that reverted to an application. So it's passed numerous tests throughout its life since 2009 to date. My experience of operating in Sweden is that specific to Norra Kärr as well, when we got PEA out in 2021, then we looked to then reapply for a mining lease. You needed a Natura 2000 permit to get the mining lease when you applied. Then the law has changed in Sweden. You don't need the Natura 2000 permit, even though the company started working on that application or part of the application. And now you don't need that. So now we're on with the mining lease. So as I touched on earlier, the sustainability of the project has gone up because we're now producing not only a heavy rare earth concentrate, we've now got an ethylene cyanide industrial mineral, and we've reduced the land take of the site by 65%, and we've reduced water consumption by up to 30%. So sustainability has gone up, environmental impact and land usage has gone down. And we have a project that's going to make a meaningful impact both in heavy rare earth supply into Europe and also ethylene cyanide industrial mineral. When it comes to the conversation around rare earths and EU studies that take place, Norra Kärr has been talked about as a strategic asset for a decade. And specifically, in one document that I came across said, if we get permitting and finance sorted out, then Norra Kärr will be in production by 2020. And that document was written in 2014. The Critical Raw
Who buy?
Materials Act, you get strategic project status, you get a legal time frame for permitting of 27 months. The European Union is saying they will facilitate access to capital, and a logical provider of that might be the European Investment Bank. And then in terms of actually bring all the parties together on the value chain to stop any one or other beating the other one over the head with a stick, usually the junior, they'll do the matchmaking and they'll make sure these offtake arrangements get put in place and get closed. So this is such a healthy environment to experience, or that I'm hoping to experience going forward, which I haven't experienced in the past. Pretty much, junior, as we talked about earlier, is left to its own devices and has to take all the risk. But I think we're entering an era now, which is, support, collaboration, and better risk sharing, where the risk should be shared.
So this kind of this alternative financing across Europe for green projects, critical mineral projects. I realize there's billions of dollars both up and downstream that can be had. Is the cost of that money is presumably one. Do you have an idea of the kind of cost of that money? Because clearly it's better than kind of diluting the heck out of shareholders. But are these sort of long-term sort of quasi-debt products we're talking about, or is there some free money in there as well? I mean, how does it work?
I think the way things have been in the past is no determinant of the way things are going to be in the future. So I think there's great degree of flexibility in how financings will be structured. And I don't know whether or not there is a rule book, but I think we're in a period where, clearly, if we think of how the market is set up now and how China has developed its supply chain over decades and the way they've gone about that in terms of supporting different parts of industry, be it primary raw material supply or be it downstream processing, and created the dependencies of Western upstream producers on downstream processing plant in China, and that's all been done with public funding, then I think that there's some creativity in how you competitively finance the development of projects that give you security of supply, because I think the geopolitical situation, the number one thing people are thinking about is security of supply. And when it comes to heavy rare earths and permanent magnets, then the CEO of Solvay was in print this summer talking about the OEMs and the customer base is looking for shorter supply chain. They're looking for security of supply. And that focus then will, you would logically think, looks to the European continent rather than to further afield. And one of the differentiating factors of Norra Kärr is its heavy rare earth proportion of 52%.
Okay. So I guess what your investors will be looking to, and anyone sort of thinking of getting involved in this, is just trying to understand how we kind of move it from theory to reality. Is it a question of, look, I know you've only been there since May, and feet barely under the desk, but what's the process that we should be looking to you to execute and deliver on, which gets you closer to maybe accessing some of this alternative financing and being in a position to access some of this alternative financing?
The pecking order in terms of near-term milestones is decisions on strategic projects get made first round mid-March 2025. Thereafter get the mining lease. I find it very difficult to imagine how a project which has already been determined to be of strategic importance to the EU, by different authorities on the subject, cannot get strategic project status. And then following that, again, the fact that the project, when it was an order of magnitude greater complexity, already had a mining lease, why we wouldn't get the mining lease, given that our application is good and meets all the requirements. Those two things fall into place. I think the world will look very different for a project like Norra Kärr in terms of the setting with regards to finance, and actually putting the flag on the map and being able to have conversations with the rest of the other parties in the ecosystem, rare earths ecosystem in Europe. So the sequential nature of the development of a mining project, the pre-feasibility, feasibility study, if we're developing a quarry, it's an order of magnitude lower in terms of complexity at site and the physical processing to get to UDLI concentrate, clearly there's a bit more intelligence required to the downstream processing. And I'm looking into again, the ecosystem with who would be the right partner to team up with to actually make that a reality. So we twin track the development of the mine and the downstream. And, again, the strategic project application process, it's looking for projects that are going to be making a meaningful impact in Europe in terms of supply by 2030. And that seems like a long time away, but that's at the outside. And I believe that we can beat that. So it's very much about being as intelligent as possible in terms of, not doing this all on our own, teaming up, forming the partnerships, good collaboration, and then making it a reality.
Well, Kurt, look, I appreciate you coming on today and going through that all, giving the update. We'll be following you with close interest. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.